Morning, authorities in Terre Haute have executed a female murderer early this morning. It's the first time in nearly 7 decades that the U.S. government has put a female inmate to death.
January 12, 2021, 12 a.m., Terre Haute, Indiana, United States Penitentiary. The clock had just hit midnight. Outside it was cold, quiet, and dark. Inside the federal prison, Lisa Montgomery sat alone in her cell. Her execution was now only hours away. She had just arrived under heavy security. Her transfer from Texas to Indiana had been long and tense, but Lisa wasn't tired. She looked wide awake, not calm, not peaceful, just distant, lost. Welcome to The Final Crime, where we walk you through the haunting last 24 hours of the world's most infamous criminals. Today, we follow the final countdown of Lisa Montgomery, the only woman executed by the U.S. federal government in nearly 70 years. Lisa wasn't like other inmates, and this wasn't a normal execution. Her case had shaken the country. Some saw her as a cold-blooded killer, others as a mentally broken woman shaped by years of pain and trauma. She had murdered a young pregnant woman and stolen the unborn baby. For that, she had been sentenced to death. But as the hours ticked down, questions were still being asked, not about the crime, but about her mind. Was Lisa Montgomery mentally stable enough to understand what was happening? 1 a.m. Her lawyers didn't think so. They said she had stopped talking, stopped responding. She showed signs of psychosis. They argued she didn't fully understand that she was about to die, and in the eyes of the law, if someone doesn't understand their punishment, they can't be executed. At that very moment, Lisa's defense team filed emergency appeals. They begged the court to stop everything. They said Lisa wasn't competent, that she needed a hearing, that executing her now would be unconstitutional. Inside her cell, Lisa refused medication. She didn't eat. She didn't speak. Guards said she just stared at the wall, quiet and still. One staff member later said, "She was the most withdrawn inmate we've ever seen on death watch." The lights in her cell never turned off. 3 guards rotated outside, taking notes every few minutes. Cameras stayed on her 24/7. No privacy, no darkness, just the cold wait. 6 a.m. Her lawyers were still fighting. A federal judge agreed, at least for a moment. He placed a temporary hold on the execution. Lisa's team had a chance. A small one, but the clock was still running. Lisa, meanwhile, scribbled notes to her attorneys and family. She didn't show panic, but she didn't show peace either. Her lawyers said she was mentally slipping further by the hour. She barely touched breakfast, didn't ask for anything, didn't protest. Outside, legal teams and prison staff braced for updates. The federal government pushed back, saying her lawyers were using delay tactics. They accused them of trying to block justice at the last second. But Lisa's defenders insisted, "This isn't a delay game. She's broken." 10 a.m. The courts were moving fast and the pressure was growing. By now, Lisa's attorneys had argued in front of multiple judges. Some courts agreed to pause, others didn't. The U.S. Department of Justice pushed hard to keep the execution on schedule. Even though the original execution date was set for December, it had been postponed due to COVID infections in her legal team. That delay had caused confusion, and now the timeline was tangled in legal red tape. But inside her cold, bright cell, Lisa sat in silence. She was barely holding on. 12 p.m. Lisa was allowed visits. Her spiritual advisor, John Francisco, sat with her. He wasn't just a chaplain. He was someone from her past, a familiar face. He had once driven her to Sunday school as a little girl. John brought with him a photo, one Lisa had given him as a child. He had kept it for decades, and now he brought it back to her. He promised he would be with her until the very end, that when the time came, he would sing soft songs from their church days, songs like "Amazing Grace" and "Jesus Loves Me." Lisa nodded. Her lawyers and spiritual advisor stayed close all day, talking, praying, waiting. 5 p.m. This was the original scheduled time for execution, but no guards came. No movement. A surprise legal decision had just landed. A new court had stepped in, the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals, raising questions about the government's handling of the case. It was a new twist, and it bought more time. The clock kept ticking. Each hour brought her closer to midnight, the legal deadline. After that, a new administration would take office, one that had promised to pause all federal executions. If Lisa's team could hold the line until midnight, she might survive, at least for now. 9 p.m. Outside the prison, protesters gathered in candlelight vigils. Some chanted, some prayed. Their signs read, "Lisa's life matters," and "Stop the execution." Inside, Lisa didn't seem to notice. She was now the center of one of the most emotional death penalty cases in modern history. Human rights groups around the world raised their voices, and social media exploded with support and outrage. But inside the prison, there was only silence. 11:30 p.m. The U.S. Supreme Court made its final ruling. Lisa's appeals were denied. The execution was back on. Warden T.J. Watson received the official order, and within minutes, white vans left the media center. They carried witnesses to the execution chamber, journalists, government officials, and members of the victim's family. Lisa was prepared for transport. January 13, 2021, 12 a.m. The curtains opened. Inside the federal execution chamber, Lisa Montgomery was strapped to the gurney. Her spiritual advisor was supposed to be there, singing softly to her, but at the last minute he was blocked. Officials said, "It's too late." He wasn't allowed in. Lisa's attorney later called it a final cruelty. Witnesses said she looked confused at first, her eyes moving slowly across the room. She wore glasses. A mask covered her face, but it was gently removed before the warden asked, "Do you have any last words?" Lisa replied softly, "No." That was it. No protest, no message, just a quiet goodbye. Her fingers tapped lightly on the straps. Her thumb had a small heart-shaped tattoo. As the lethal drugs entered her body, her fingers stopped moving. At exactly 1:31 a.m., Lisa Montgomery was pronounced dead. She was the first woman executed by the federal government in 67 years. Some called it justice, others called it a tragedy. What remains is a story of violence, trauma, and a broken mind. A case that forced the world to ask, can a woman born into horror ever truly escape it? And does that horror excuse what she became? Thanks for watching The Final Crime. If you want more real stories about the final 24 hours of history's most dangerous people, hit like, subscribe, and tell us what you think in the comments. Because some endings leave scars that never fade.